Over the past several years, one of the most unfortunate trends inside evangelicalism has been the rise of deconstruction. For many people, it begins with legitimate questions or real frustrations. One of the most visible examples of that journey today is Tim Whitaker and the movement he founded called the New Evangelicals. Now, to be clear, I do think some of the problems Tim identifies are real. I fully believe that shallow evangelicalism has failed many people. But where I strongly disagree with Tim is in the conclusions he ultimately reaches. Because I also encounter many of the same categories of information, categories like broader scholarship, church history, or just simply difficult theological questions or problems in the evangelical culture. I went out of my way to read many of the same authors Tim references, but instead of moving away from historic Christianity, I found myself driven deeper into it. So today, we're going to continue walking through Tim's story, interact with several key clips, and explain why I believe the modern deconstruction movement often mistakes shallow Christianity collapsing for Christianity itself collapsing. Hey everyone, I'm Kelvin Anderson. Shortly I'll be joined by Josiah Spencer. You're watching Cloud and Fire by Kelvin's Faith Unfiltered. Kelvin's Faith Unfiltered is a reformed postmillennial platform designed to help us all be shaped by reason, guided by faith, and grounded in Christ. Here's my co-host, Josiah Spencer.
Hey everybody, we're getting ready to go into another clip here of Tim Whitaker, founder of the New Evangelicals. He's discussing his deconstruction, his story, how he left historic Christianity, essentially. And in this clip that we're going to look at, he continues to discuss the role that his former coworker, guy he just refers to as Joey, who is a homosexual, how that experience and that relationship, how it kind of shocked his world, and how that played a role in his deconstruction.
I'm in this world, and I'm talking to Joey. I'm not working at Starbucks anymore, but we keep in touch on Facebook, and we argue sometimes. And one day we're messaging back and forth, and he tells me a part of his story. He said that when he was 13, he came out to his youth group pastor, and his youth group pastor called him an abomination and told him never to come back. This is Joey, my gay coworker. I couldn't fathom a pastor saying something so hateful to someone. Now, again, I'm a young white man in the church, right? I'm not having this experience at all. The church is built for people like me. When Joey told me that, it was really kind of a wake-up call. And I started realizing that the church, in my mind, seemed to be picking on certain sins. I call them sins still, right? So why are we so focused on homosexuality when the Bible talks a lot about greed? I'm starting to see some of these discrepancies, right? Not able to understand like this megachurch culture that I thought was pagan, and also why we were selectively picking on certain sins that affected people outside the church when in 1 Corinthians 5, for example, Paul tells the church to worry about things that are happening inside the church and not to worry about things happening outside the church. So I'm reading the Bible, and I'm like, guys, the Bible's clear. Why are we picking on the gay person who's not even in our church, and we're ignoring like the greed or the gluttony or whatever other sin I thought what was happening?
So, I mean, we just have to address the elephant in the room right away. First of all, Joey was in the church. It was his youth pastor that addressed him. We already spoke last week that we completely disagreed with the way that Joey's pastor handled the situation.
Yeah.
I would not have a 13-year-old or whatever come to me and say that they were a homosexual and call them an abomination and tell them never to come back. Yeah. That doesn't make sense. I don't think that that's representative of evangelicalism as a whole. I also feel sympathetic in the idea that people are trying to say that certain sins are elevated as worse than others.
Absolutely.
So I am sympathetic here. Now, for those who are really conservative and know about our show and how we are, I hope that doesn't set you on edge, because we're not condoning any of the sins, but there is an issue inside of the church. Not just inside evangelicalism, inside of Catholicism, inside of Anglicanism, inside of whichever denomination you want to pick, where we have a tendency as a culture to pick which sins we like to elevate the most.
Yeah. Certainly there is first of all, it's interesting to me how he mentions the megachurch, pagan, all that. We talked about the Pagan Christianity book last time. It's, again, just interesting to me how he's got this vision of what he's rejecting. And you're like, well, yeah, I reject that too. if you're rejecting something that's really artificial and showy and like, yeah, that's not Christianity either. That's not worship. That's not the church. But this idea that we as Americans have condoned certain sins, I think gluttony is a perfect example. And I'm not sitting here saying like that I'm totally free of that either. But
well, that's because you have a metabolism of a 12-year-old. I mean, it's not really fair.
I appreciate that. But yeah, I really do think, that is a valid critique. As far as
Agreed.
like a debate like strategy, I don't think that's legitimate. Like you can't say, well, this is also bad, that means that this isn't bad. That's not how things work. They're all sins. But certainly his critique that, I see people who are, and again, you just wonder what kind of socioeconomic background he has, what he was seeing, what he was around.
Well, a couple of things. He described himself as not going to a mega church. So where did that come from?
That seemed like that was more in his, when he was getting into the charismatic
Pentecostal drums. It just seems weird to have brought that up after you described that I grew up in a really small church that only had, hymns and whatever. So the second part of this, though, is the idea of you made the statement, why are we picking on people outside the church? So we addressed the fact that Joey seemed to be in the church, so that doesn't really categorize that. But what does he mean by picking on? I have an issue with that vague term, people outside the church. So are you saying that if I vote in some form of an election against gay marriage, that I'm picking on them?
Yeah.
Now, about the elevation of certain thoughts or certain sins above others, I may also vote for no-fault divorce.
Yeah.
Okay? So I'm not choosing personally, and I think a lot of people would agree with me, that we would vote the same way on that and be picking on both heterosexuals and homosexuals if that's the criteria for picking on them.
Yeah, we're trying to have a biblical moral compass.
How dare you enforce your biblical worldview on others, even though that's the exact thing that's happening to the other side.
He does mention I don't think it was in that clip, at another point he mentions that he believed that, homosexuality was wrong, but that they should have rights. And
I think that's early on. I don't think that he thinks that way at all now.
That was part of his journey, but he's like at this point, and so there's that sense, again, it's very political.
Well, yeah, because I don't know. When he says picking on them, I would like to understand what he thinks by that. I think we both would agree that the way Joey was treated was inappropriate and could be considered picking on. Yeah. But how far are you going to take that? Are you saying that if I say that, we should rein in our behaviors and our lusts, that's picking on someone, then I don't think we're not really on the same path. So
he doesn't really mention, like, is this from the pulpit? Is this, talk radio? Yeah, where is he hearing people pick on homosexuality? I've seen that a million times on the internet. Why you talk about homosexuality being wrong when you've got people with, my future book I'm going to write, God, Guns, and 4 Divorces. But you can cut that in post.
No, that's staying in there. One of the other things when we're talking about what is picking on them is protesting a LGBTQ rally that has explicit material down our city streets. Is that picking on them?
Drag queens reading, story hour at your local library.
You've got to be more specific. Abuse where people are being assaulted. Yeah, I'm all with you. Stop that. Yeah. Don't do that. Don't take the law into your own hands. Don't be judge, jury, executioner. Don't be the guy who's, throwing coffee at people or, yelling slurs. No, but I think that he crosses over into things that, don't exactly align with me when it comes into like, well, how should I vote on this particular issue? How should I address it if asked about it? Do I have to acquiesce to all modern pop psychology and philosophy on this topic, on whether or not it's a choice or behaviorism or all that? we've got to go beyond that. So
it is saying that something is wrong. Picking on
you're
it.
not allowed to do that anymore.
Here's the thing. People think that in those spaces, evangelicals don't want your questions, that the church doesn't want your questions. That's not true. The evangelical church loves your questions. You can ask them whatever you want. The trick is that you have to come to their conclusions. So if you ask a question about hell, oh, please, yes, let's talk, Tim, let's talk about hell. What does the Bible say about hell?
He's really
in their
stuck
back
on that
pocket,
hell
they're
thing.
going to lead you to, well, anyone outside of Christ is going to burn in hell forever or be punished in hell forever. If you disagree with that answer, then we're going to have a problem. But if you have questions about any of this stuff, by all means, feel free to ask. So here I am, want to love God, love my neighbor. What's the Bible say about homosexuality? What's the Bible say about heaven and hell? And again, you're getting redirected to all these evangelical authors and pseudo scholars and influencers that are just reinforcing the truth that the Bible is clear on these issues.
Those are weird examples that are shown there.
Oh my. So much to say here, and I don't want to get bogged down. But the pseudo scholar, the apologist kind of idea that anyone who says something outside of not scholarship, basically modern critical scholarship, is just doesn't have any value for him.
Yeah.
And I sat there and thought, when he brought up homosexuality, I thought, well, if you want to talk about scholarship, where's Robert Gagnon? Like, he's one of the leading scholars on this topic. Where's his face? He put up, what's that guy? Chan or whatever his name is.
Yeah, Chan.
And then was that Ravi Zachariah?
That's a really bad.
Oh my goodness! Like
that seemed on purpose.
Like does he know like actual conservative scholars? I mean,
yeah. Well, number one, we all.
And then he's telling, but
maybe we don't all know what happened with Ravi
Frank
Zacharias.
Viola. I mean, he's the man according to him. Like you're Frank Viola is basically in the same category of the guys he just showed. But that was his
less
influence.
Popular maybe, but
no, I meant in the actual scholarship aspect of it.
Not considered scholarly.
No.
Just the way that he uses the term the evangelical church as if it is this kind of uniform kind of like
right.
That's hard to debate that.
Would you say it's fair that he's really rejecting the community that holds that name and probably a certain segment and probably not the majority that he doesn't like, and is therefore thrown the baby out with the bathwater and gotten rid of the whole deal?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
So you feel really at odds with yourself because there's a part of yourself that's empathetic, which now is toxic apparently, that is like, I don't know though, like in my heart, I don't know why my gay neighbor Joey is inherently sinful just for being gay, especially when I know he didn't choose this. Like he was just born this way, right? Well, it doesn't matter because the Bible is clear and we have to choose truth over our feelings. You can see how this all kind of gets reinforced in this space, but also creates teenagers and young people who are full of contradictions and intention with their head and with their heart.
He seems at odds with any sense of objectivity. Anything objective morality, objective truth.
Oh, we're going to get there. Yeah, that's definitely.
So but also, again, valid kind of claim that, we should have a space. Yeah, that kind of sounds stupid, but we should have a culture of discussing things with our young adults and not trying to poo-poo them.
But now we're told we can't.
And that's just it. It's like
we can't disagree. At least
you can't actually hold to objective standards that Christianity has held forever. You can have you're being disingenuous if you are willing to have a conversation, but you have answers.
What is a community in his mind? A community is identified by common beliefs. So he's criticizing when a person comes to an evangelical leader and they have an answer, which is what you said.
Yeah.
He's criticizing that. And maybe he'll say, well, that's the straw man. He goes, well, I'm just saying that they don't allow for the other views. Yes, they do. But they're also willing to combat them if they think that they're wrong and it doesn't represent that community.
Yeah,
this
absolutely.
is culture from
every culture
forever.
has. I mean, you think about even as our culture, as a country, as states, and all these kinds of things.
There's certain things we have to agree on to live next to each other.
We can't believe that everything is acceptable. Radical libertarianism is unsustainable.
Well, it's anarchy.
Right. If certain behaviors are detrimental to the community, if they are against the standards of morality of the community, then we have to stand for what we believe is truth. And that seems to be what he's rejecting.
Right. And the problem is he doesn't have the knowledge base, and he doesn't have the capacity to deal with them issue by issue. He often refers to scholars, which ultimately are critical scholars that hold a certain set of presuppositions and a certain set of views that end up happening to get him to be able to defend what he's already concluded. He's already said it. He's already tipped his hand. I had conflict with these things. And what did he do? He went to look for somebody to justify every conflict that he had.
When I saw pastors that I knew and Sunday school teachers that raised me insist that I had to vote for the guy on the cover of Playboy magazine, the guy who was bragging about assaulting women, I could not understand. And I'm like, whoa, wait. I thought that our integrity and that our values mattered the most. I thought that when the world tells us to compromise, we don't compromise.
So I'm just going to get this out of the way real fast. The assumption there is that voting for the other side was not a compromise at all.
Yeah. He seems to be combating these people on the internet posting, I don't know if it probably wasn't AI back then, but posting these memes where like Trump looks like a savior figure.
Yeah.
And there are a very fringe group of evangelicals who allowed their Trumpism to become religious devotion. And, but I have been pretty outspoken on my blog and online back in the day about my political views and all that. But to act like everybody who voted for Trump did so because they viewed him as this kind of salvific figure, this messenger from God, come to deliver us from the evil immigrants, that is just not what the majority of conservative Trump voters were voting for. They were voting for what they viewed as a guy that made more sense for the country at the time.
The presupposition goes back to the first thing I said after the clip.
Yeah.
The idea is that the other side is not a compromise.
Yeah.
Or that the other side is a lesser compromise. And I'm sorry, but it wasn't. I disagree with a lot of things that Trump does. I have no problem stating them in the proper context. This isn't a political show, so I'm not really interested in trying to air them all out. But I'm sorry, the other side was a really, really, really bad choice and a really bad option, and I don't have any issue being able to deal with psychologically somebody voting for Trump because that was the best option.
I think he does default to tribalism. The way that he speaks is very much like Trump was bad, therefore I must go to the other camp.
Trump gets elected, and then during that time, of course, we had the Black Lives Matter movement. One of the things that changed my life and how I started seeing the world was seeing the murder of Ahmaud Arbery on camera. When I saw that execution of Ahmaud Arbery, I didn't know anything. I was still a very white evangelical. In my mind, Martin Luther King Jr. solved racism in the 60s. That's what I was taught. But when I saw Ahmaud Arbery's murder, I went, no, something is wrong. Like, I don't have words for it, but there's something that tells me there's an issue with how we treat black people in this country.
Wow. He figured out that it was wrong to shoot a black man. What was groundbreaking in that? So first of all, I had to go look up the case because I did not remember it.
I do remember that. I actually, on my blog, I remember writing about that.
Okay. The men were convicted.
Yeah.
What are you looking for? What's systemic about that? Men committed a crime. Horrible. Basically, it was vigilantism. They had basically decided to be the judge, jury, and executioner.
Yeah, I recall.
And then they were convicted. And
yeah,
what cracked his shell?
We talked about this a little bit before when we were preparing about the amount of time he was apparently spending on the internet.
Yeah.
And how and because I was there, and that was really the period of my life where I realized I have to spend less time on the internet, because you really did.
He's not talking about our show.
Every time somebody said anything, you had somebody else who was just going to disagree just because they were from a different tribe.
Yeah.
And the way that the algorithms were being manipulated, the way that, and we know this now, but just the way that the media was so, they were trying to do a lot of things. But to me, you're literally saying you bought the media hype, but also the way that every time a tragedy happens, every tragedy was weaponized.
Yeah.
And like, to me, I'm like, you were just really spending too much time on social media. I mean, most human beings were most Americans were stepping back and saying, hey, let's wait and let's see what really happened here. Let's try to assess this. These crimes are, these events, these tragedies are individual events. To act like this is something that I have to reject evangelicalism because a black man was shot is
I'm glad you say that.
And then I had friends of mine, I'm not kidding you, start sharing YouTube videos blatantly lying about the situation, like saying that Ahmaud was armed or Ahmaud was like a criminal. And I'm like, guys, I'm fact checking this stuff and it's not true. There was no weapon. Like, he was innocent. Why are we believing lies? Because again, in this world, over and over again, you're taught to believe truth. And then we had the murder of Breonna Taylor and of course George Floyd and many others. And I started seeing like this pattern. I went, again, something isn't right. I don't know what. Something isn't right. So I picked up the book by Jamar Tisby called The Color of Compromise that shattered my world. And here I am reading The Color of Compromise from a Christian historian, by the way, and I'm reading these horrific stories about lynchings and segregation and how Christians, white evangelical Christians, were the ones behind a lot of this stuff.
How can you live in the United States and not know about the Ku Klux Klan and about things that happened during segregation and Jim Crow laws and all of those things until that stage of his life?
Yeah.
I'm just befuddled by that. He's going from this right-wing evangelical, shallow in many ways, and never crossing paths with Vodi Baucham's Fault Lines book, right? Or alternative ways of interpreting where our actual culture is today, not acknowledging any improvements that we've made. He's talking about things 100 years ago now, or 50 years ago, some of them. I mean, it's a wide range, but...
Well, he's rejecting this way that he saw a lot of his friends and family, I'm sure, acting a certain way on the internet, as if there aren't equally tribal people on the left who would do the same thing.
Excellent point.
And like, that's why I was saying before, like, just to reject those instincts of every time something happens, we have to weaponize it.
Maybe like every cop that is in a shooting was racially driven.
Yes.
Right? Without the facts being investigated at all. Instantly saying a white cop shot a black suspect, it had to be racially driven.
And that's where, again, it's like, okay, this is a legitimate concern. I, too, had a lot of people who are like, guys, you need to stop sharing stuff. Just wait and see, be unbiased. That clip was kind of wild, though. I'm gonna be honest.
And then COVID happens, and once again, I'm watching pastors I know, I'm watching people I serve with on the worship team, talking about how masks are tyranny, how it's a pandemic, how this is big government control. And I'm like, guys, why is this a big deal? It's a global pandemic. I think as a Christian, loving your neighbor as yourself looks like wearing a mask during a pandemic. I don't think it's tyranny at all. Even if it wasn't as effective as we hoped, it's still the point that we're trying to do everything that we can, right? I mean, in the beginning, guys, we were wiping down our surfaces. We weren't sure how it spread. There was no vaccine. There was no really known...
Does he not wipe down his surfaces now?
Way to treat COVID? It made sense to me.
I don't want to eat at his house. Apparently, he doesn't wipe down his surfaces anymore.
We don't have time to go through COVID.
We're going to get this a little bit because some of what he said is... Go ahead.
It's wild to me, though, that knowing what we know now, the people he's describing were more justified than he was. Like,
Okay.
that's...
Well,
but again, just the association of people who are saying things about COVID, again, I do believe there were people who were wrong on the right about COVID.
All right, but I want to pause you there because we need to go to this part first, right? I mean, I'm not a historian like Jamar Tisby. But do you remember when COVID happened? Do you remember the year?
I do.
Do you remember who was president?
I do.
So I'm really confused here. If Trump's the evil and cause of all things and Christians are defending Trump no matter what, then what is he talking about when he says people were making all these conspiracies about COVID if it was under Trump's reign?
Yeah, which Trump was pushing the vaccine.
He was. He said, we're going to have a vaccine. We're going to have it faster than anybody could ever imagine happening. It's going to cure everyone, and we're just going to be all fine.
We'll get kicked off the internet if we go down the vaccine road.
We're not going to do that. That's not the point of this. The point is that this...
I'd really like to, but...
No, this is not...
Why are you associating evangelicalism with COVID conspiracy theories? To me, that's just a very shallow theological...
Because he saw evangelicals do that.
Yeah.
And he didn't apparently see any leftists have conspiracy theories. Concerning the culture, pastors and Christian leaders have to make decisions and have to engage in the culture all the time. They're not always going to be right. They're going to be wrong. And that's life. They do it on the left as well. So I'm sure there were evangelical churches that acted, as a matter of fact, we know this, in the exact opposite way of what he's describing. Churches that never reopened because of the devastation of them shutting down for so long and the disassociation amongst the congregation and the lack of funding. Now, he wants to summarize it all, and this is what bothers me. He wants to summarize it all as masks. It's all about masks. That is a straw man of a historical event of mass proportion.
Yeah.
Because he goes into, and we're about to get to it, where the straw that broke the camel's back was people actually meeting together in large groups.
Outside.
Right. And this blew his mind.
The idea, though, again, just this association that I'm going to reject, and again, I'm sure he would say it's more complex than this, but the way he's presenting it, this is the final straw, is basically the way certain evangelicals are and I would say it was not the majority, but the way that certain evangelicals were reacting, again, it sounds to me like the groups that he was in on Facebook, he had a lot of people who were uncharitable and were making their politics their religion. And again, we've talked about this, this Republican-esque evangelicalism. You're rejecting historic Christianity because of COVID?
Yeah.
It's just a very shallow...
If you summarize the mask issue into whether or not it's loving your neighbor as opposed to science, health, and political categories, if you're summarizing it into just loving your neighbor, you are so extreme in your views, I don't know how to engage with you. I don't know what our common view of society and culture is. If you're just saying, because there were people with health conditions that literally couldn't do it, people at jobs who would pass out, people with heart conditions that would literally go into cardiac arrest, and we're just categorizing as anybody who didn't wear a mask was unloving to their neighbor.
People's businesses were destroyed.
Oh yes, never to recover.
Were we loving our neighbor? So the idea that we couldn't try to parse things out and have actual discussions, because again, this is what it sounds like he's saying. The idea that you're having discussions instead of going, well, it made sense to me. That's just a very reductionist. He mentions Black Lives Matters. Again, we're talking about an organization that was terribly corrupt.
Right.
I mean, it's...
And here's the point. I don't want to get into debates about what happened around COVID.
Yeah.
We're not trying to argue for any particular view.
Yeah. There were evils on
We're
every
just
side.
saying that the caricature that he's creating in the oversimplification of the matters is so extreme, and he's getting like the further he gets along in this deconstruction journey, the less credibility what is bothering him actually, is reality.
Yeah.
So
And then
hopefully we're
I
close.
saw a worship leader. Now, again, I'm a drummer in the worship space. This is my world. I see this worship leader named Sean Foyt doing these maskless worship gatherings across the U.S. called Let Us Worship, Faith Over Fear. And that was when I had it. I was like, nope, something is wrong. This is it. We need a new something. We need a new evangelical movement. I thought of the name The New Evangelicals. And I started this Instagram account a few months later, and it blew up. Okay, because I was wondering, is anyone else out there thinking about this stuff the way I am? Any other Christians who grew up like me concerned about the direction that we are going in? Is there anyone at all? It turned out, yeah, there's a lot of people like me. The term was called deconstructing. They were deconstructing their faith. They were having this moment of fresh air, maybe we can say, coming into their lungs, where they said, wait a second, something is wrong with how I grew up.
Wow, that was the straw for him. I so cannot relate to that part of the story that I could look at it and go, and I'm trying to be fair, I go, maybe that was a bad idea. But how that breaks down that's the straw that breaks the camel's back. I don't understand.
Here's the
much
thing.
more.
When you deconstruct, essentially what happens is you get above ground for the first time. Some people, when they get there, they run straight out the door of the Christian tradition, right? And that is a very valid journey in deconstruction. I have absolutely no judgment or shame to anyone watching this who chose that path. It is completely valid as far as I'm concerned. Personally, I left the basement not to leave Jesus, but to find Jesus.
I won't drop any names, but we've both had experiences with someone whose story sounds very much like that. And probably a lot of Christians have stories of people that have given that.
Well,
I'm lost. He says the message of Jesus matters, but did he read Lewis? Lunatic, liar, or Lord? He said all the other things, that Jesus is the only way. And he's basically going, hey, I understand it when people are just done with this.
Yeah. Well, that's actually the religion of our day, moral therapeutic deism. And as he talks about this, like, it's a totally valid thing to reject God altogether. You're like, so what good is it? Religion is apparently not an objective reality. It's a subjective thing that helps me live my life.
Right.
And that's at the last 5-10 minutes of his video that becomes clear.
Let's go to that.
Being above ground was overwhelming. So I'm like, oh my gosh, like all of a sudden now I'm interviewing scholars of the Bible. I mean, like real scholars, not evangelical scholars. I mean, like I'm interviewing Pete Enns. I've interviewed Dan McClellan. I've interviewed Angela Parker, Dr. Angela Parker, Jennifer Bird. So now I'm learning about the reality that, like, this book called the Bible, right, was assembled by people over time. I'm learning things like, wait, we don't have any of the original manuscripts. Like, we don't have any of the original writings for what we have today. None. What? Like, I wasn't taught that. I was never taught ever that we don't have any of the original. They're called autographs.
That's all I could take.
We touched base on that last time about how textual criticism, that's absolutely something we should teach kids, parishioners, whatever. To say that you had no idea that it was...
No, that's the issue. Not kids, parishioners, whatever. It's all Christians.
Yeah.
We want a very surface-based religion, and that is a problem, and I agree with him on that.
Yeah, the fact that you didn't know that the Bible was written by men over time that's a problem.
Why? Why is it that what we're doing, where we're interacting with scholarship on a weekly basis, on our programs, but on a daily basis, why are we going and looking for the conservative scholars and listening to the rebuttals to the critical scholarship, and he does not? I've never heard him interact with one of them. I've never heard him critique them. He picks low-hanging fruit. I mean, when he said the scholars that he was being pushed to were Francis Chen and Ravi Zachariah, and he's showing pastors, not really scholars, that are feeding him this, it means his exposure is still extremely limited. And I don't think he understands the difference between milk and meat. because I think that he walked away from milk, which we all should as we grow up, and no one walked him through the meat. What he's saying is nothing new. It's been something we've been combating for some time. All these issues that he's bringing up, there are counter arguments that are solid and from real scholars. I've found real help in people like Dr. James White, Dr. Michael Kruger, when talking about the canon and the formation of the canon of Scripture. Robert Gagnon on sexuality, who's a very well-respected scholar. The deity of Christ, Robert Bowman and Michael Bird talking about that topic. These are guys that really know what they're talking about, and they're just brushed under. The Resurrection, Mike Licona, I just finished that book, audio book. He's written a 700 and some page book on the resurrection.
Anytime somebody's speaking unequivocally in these kinds of conversations, that's when you have to be a little bit wary. And so to act like, oh, everything I was taught was totally wrong, and here's real scholars who are telling me the truth, that's just... Again, it's very shallow sounding.
One of the key takeaways from watching this is that we need to arm ourselves as Christians to deal with this. We need to expose ourselves to conservative scholarship to be able to think about these topics. You also need to remember that you are told that you need to have an answer for the faith that is in you. And with that, let's go to the big finish. So that's where we're going to end this discussion. I hope this series helps show that encountering difficult questions, broader scholarship, or even serious problems inside evangelical culture does not mean historic Christianity collapses. In many cases, it simply means we need deeper foundations than the ones we've inherited. So, if you enjoyed this discussion, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future content. And don't forget, Cloud and Fire releases new episodes every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And Kelvin's Faith Unfiltered drops the weekly breakdown every Thursday at the same time. So until next time, stay shaped by reason, guided by faith, and grounded in Christ. Take it easy.